This in-session meeting investment committee to order and here to talk about interim topics. And so with that, we've got Mr. Treasurer. Man, yeah, see the other guy. Hopefully that was on purpose. It was a procedure of so sorry. You did. Are you in an accident or you just? Okay. Yeah. I mean. Oh man.
We're gonna get some skin color.
I thought you already wore makeup. Oh, I look at that. All I know is when I look in the mirror, I need help. That's what I know. So anyway, welcome. So Mr. Treasurer, we're glad to have you here today. If you want to visit with us, or you got Ryan or Don, or excuse me, Alex or Don or somebody you want to visit with, or you want to talk to us? Matt. All right, Matt.
Up here, let these guys kind of
Sure.
show and my opinion.
Okay. Mr. Sackett, hi. Hello, Ms. Williams.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Don Williams, Deputy State Treasurer.
Okay, go ahead and take over. I can talk to Brian for a second.
We have two requests for interim topics that we presented or sent an email to you for. The first one regards a selection panel. Over the last summer, the legislature added last session added 2 members to the selection panel for the investment funds committee. As it turned out, as we began to solicit applicants for the selection panel, it occurred a couple of different things happened that occurred to us that we might need some more parameters around the makeup of the selection panel and sort of timing for selections. So what happened was one of the people who is on the selection panel wanted to be considered for membership on the IFC. There is no provision for what to do in the case where that happens. Is he required to resign as the selection panel member so that so that he can become eligible for the IFC? Or do we suspend his selection panel membership until the IFC selection has been made by the remaining selection panel members? And then we have an even number of selection panel members. So what happens if we have a tie? Some things there was no chairman provision to be selected for the selection panel. So the coordination of meetings and decision-making was oftentimes fell to Matt Sackett in our office to try to help guide that along with no time limits for that selection panel selection, for the selections to be made. The selection took an inordinate amount of time from the time we solicited applications to the time that they were actually interviewed and selected for the funds committee. So these are just some of the things that we had never encountered before that as a result of adding 2 new members kind of brought to light. And so we put in a request to you to perhaps consider tightening or adding some more parameters around that selection panel and how its operations.
Mr. Chairman, I might add, Matt Sackett with the Treasurer's Office. Some of this was part of the IFC's discussion during the House Bill 244 process when the IFC looked at changes to the investment program and other things. Part of that discussion did involve the selection panel, and their general idea would be to leave the selection panel the same kind of arm's length transaction, but did think that a few tweaks like this with the chairman and a few other things would help clarify the selection panel and the process that they use. So it was thought of and contemplated by the IFC as well.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I think one of the things that we'll have to do is make sure that we have some firm timetables that are responsive to the needs of the selection process by the slip board members that seat the selection members. Because there are times when, for whatever reason, you'll lose a selection member. And that process also kind of hindered the, I guess, the functionality of the process. And then also there were times when slip members just couldn't find anybody. And I think what we need to do is have a fail safe.
Mr. Treasurer, I'm sorry.
Okay, better? Oh, yeah, I hear you now. I can hear myself now too, yeah. So I think it would be, important to have a fail safe that if that process wasn't carried out by a SLIB member, that we did maybe have a subcommittee of the IFC that would jump in and provide a name to go on the selection panel, or maybe open it up to all. So there's got to be a process that when it takes an extended period of time, that there's an alternative route to make sure that the business is done in a timely manner.
I think that's a great idea, and we'll definitely put this together and get your input on it. So.
One of the things that we want to do as a whole, Mr. Co-Chair, is, I think we just want to look in light of the fact that neither the resolutions failed on the, we just need to see how close we get to that model under the existing. And so I think obviously looking at this as a part of that. I mean, it's this whole structure. And it's not how much we change, it's what do we, it's not we change it all. It's how do we just keep driving it towards this goal that we all have of being able to invest these things as best that we can for the state of Wyoming. So I think that's
If you've got only 5 members or quorum there, that they can still operate what they need to do.
some governance. We can, we've got a few years of experience, and it's time to do the things you always do, which is, how do we make it run smoother? How do we make it run better?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Great, thanks for the recommendation.
Mr. Chairman, we had one other request that we submitted, if you're ready to move on to that one. And this one is regarding performance compensation for the team versus just the investment professionals in the office. The request is to conduct a peer study of salaries, because even within state government, between our closest peer, the Wyoming retirement system, there are some of our folks whose salaries are not aligned. And so we are respectfully asking for a review of not only our Wyoming peers, but also other sovereign wealth fund peers to determine whether or not our salaries are in line with market, and as part of that, to consider whether performance compensation should be considered for all of the folks who contribute to the return, the investment process for the state.
And in doing that, Mr. Co-Chairman, I think in doing that, it's also, we'll just look at the whole thing now. We've got it. We've seen how it works. Did it work the way we thought it would work? Is there, how do we modify this so it works? And not just in your office. I think we need to do that for WRS as well. Just make sure that, we just put these things in. We thought we knew how it would work. Now that's happened. Now that there's been some incentive compensation accrue, did it work like we thought it would? Did it create the right incentives? Did we miss the boat on part of the incentive? Let's look at it and see, maybe we got it just right. Maybe it needs a little, it's like the IFC stuff. Maybe it needs a little tweaking.
Mr. Chairman, that's exactly right. Things that we didn't anticipate maybe, and that now that we're in it, we have a little bit more perspective. So thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, and I guess in the whole issue of trying to find help in different areas, and as you guys all know, that the labor market is really competitive. And I think I mentioned to you what our auditor told us as far as their shop, where people are telling them that you're going to need a 40 or 50% increase over what the person was sitting in it that was going out. So I think that the whole overall view of all of those different positions, and we may have to go outside the governmental realm, because essentially most of the people that we hire are not from government. They're
You
from
pull that mic a little closer.
they're not from government. They're from the private sector. So we need to know what the private sector is actually doing too, because there isn't just a bubble of governmental employees that we draw from. Because we haven't, I would say, well over half the people that we've gotten recently are both from out of state, and they're not from governmental areas. So those are the things that we're really looking at as far as where we're going to try to find the next people. It's going to have to be a nationwide search, and we're going to have to go in places that basically have some depressed job markets. So we might actually pick somebody up. So there's and it's just not our agency, it's across, everybody in everybody's government agency. This inflation is going to be I think it's going to be a wage spiral inflation right now. That's what it's going to. And so we're in for, I think, several years of increases in the labor market across all areas of government.
Okay. Mr. Co-Chair, questions for the treasurer or any follow-up? So while we have you here, Mr. Co-Chair, I think it would be useful to give us if you could, Don, give us an update on what's transpiring in your back office and how we're proceeding and how far along we are in catching up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So things are proceeding. I'm happy to report positively. We made our deadline. We were early last week. We had till March 4th as far as the audit goes, I should back up. And we provided all of our transactions to the auditor's office last Monday for journal entries.
Through when?
Through when?
Through what month or what year?
Oh, so this is for the audit. So
Okay.
that this is for the FY21 outstanding items that we were supposed to have to them so that they could provide the information to our component units. And so the audit is moving along as was, per the revised schedule. As for catching up in our office, we are working very closely. We're working on our upgrade for our investment accounting software. We are on target with our projections and
So
project timelines.
If you could, just for the committee,
Mhm.
walk us through your timeline and that handout that you sent us.
Okay.
And
Okay,
and
so
what-
Mr.
when- just kind of explain what you're doing. So they know.
Okay, sure, Mr. Chairman and committee. So we, in the treasurer's office, we have utilized an investment software accounting system from circa 1996. So that and over the years, the office had used just a tiny margin of that system. So when the treasurer and I came to the office, we started looking at how we could, and also the previous administration had brought to the legislature many times about the number of spreadsheets that the treasurer's office utilized to accomplish its duties. So the idea has always been to revise and modify the investment accounting software. So we started that, did a huge due diligence process, went through one vendor, decided to know how they were going to do, went through another vendor, which is our current vendor, did some comparison, did a lot of pre-development work, and eventually settled on Broadridge. And that is our current vendor. They have obviously updated their systems since 1996, and we are developed a process for phased implementation. The first phase will be completed, ready to go live on July 1st, coinciding with our new biennium. And that is the project that I just told the chairman.
And and just for people, some people actually watch these things
Uh-huh.
that don't know what we're talking about. Just when you say completing phase one, give us what summary of that means.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. So phase one is our first iteration of the project, and that will, like I said, will go July 1st, and that is where we will have a new chart of accounts, and we will have our distributions that go through that system. There's just a myriad of things. So then phase two will begin in July, and then we start to do some of the things that will be more nice to have, but primarily in that phase one, we're looking at that manager reconciliation issue that we came across that has been the thorn in our side, to put it mildly, for this FY21 audit. And so we'll have real-time reconciliation between those manager reports and our custodial bank, which is going to be transformational for us.
So, and speaking of the bank, how is that going? I mean, have we been able to identify, as we've done this push, that we identify how much of that problem was with our bank, with JP Morgan?
Mr. Chairman, it was a combination of the reporting between the managers and the banks. And it's not just one issue. It's multiple different issues, but it has been in that reconciliation of each manager to our custodial bank. That is something that we, in conjunction with all of this work with the audit, as well as our upgrade of our system, we employed KPMG, which is a top 4 accounting firm in the country, to come in and try to help us as we navigate some of these issues that we didn't know we had until recently, with this reconciliation, for instance, as well as to sort of act as an advisor as we go forward, as we complete our upgrade, looking for them to say, hey, have you thought about this? Have you considered that? I've seen how these folks do it, that kind of thing. Our vendor is really good at that too. They've been instrumental, saying, gosh, if that's your steps, I think we can cut them out. You know, what if we did it this way? And our team has been very open. We're engaged fully in testing already. And so there's a lot of collaboration, and it makes me feel really excited and positive. I'm hesitantly positive, but that we're going to be successful. And I think that we have a really good team in place. And so KPMG will, they are attending all of those meetings that we have with our vendor as well, paying attention. We engaged them as well as our statewide auditor, MHP, as we reviewed the constitutional amendment bills that did end up, the joint resolutions that did end up failing, but we did engage those folks that were trying to be, proactive and vocal. I think one of the things that we've done in the treasurer's office before is we've said, well, we'll figure it out. And we've just kind of let things, but now we're trying to say, well, we'll figure it out, but here are the things that we want to warn you what the possible consequences may be, depending on what decision you make, so just trying to be more proactive that way. I think did I cover it all?
So phase 2, go a little more discussion on that, and what's the timeline for phase 2?
Mr. Chairman, so the phase 2 is those things that are the things that we would like to have that aren't critical to that first day on July 1st. And we think that's about 3 or 4 months into the next fiscal year. And then we are contemplating a possible phase 3, because as we go along, those things that we identify, reporting, we'll have basic reporting obviously within phase 1, but some more, different as we go along, we might say, well, it would be nice to have this report. It would be nice to have that report. It would be nice to be able to do this. It would be nice to be able to do that. We've kind of contemplated some of that happening in phase 2. And then we're, like I said, we're keeping phase 3 open for things that we haven't contemplated yet, that we're not aware of, that is even a possibility.
And so Dawn, so when we get done with phase one, then when phase one is completed, we anticipate that, I just restate what I think I heard, that the spreadsheets where we're doing the entry of the orders and things, now whether it's from a manager or whether it's from in-house, that those will now be inputting those directly into the investment accounting information system, this new system. And so you're running those, you'll have those running side by side. We'll be able to match those and make sure everything is brilliant. But ultimately the spreadsheets will be gone and everything will be into the system now. Am I understanding that right? Or at least as part of at least the investment accounting function.
Mr. Chairman, that's essentially true. We'll still have some things where we'll take the data out of our system and we'll put them into spreadsheets to do
Sure.
analysis. But what we do now is quite a bit of data compilation. And what will happen now is that data will be in our system. And that is going to be a game changer for our folks. Some of those right now, they're taking information maybe from 4 source documents and putting it into a worksheet and then having to manipulate. It'll all be in the system so that they can see it in one place without having to do that pre-work. That's very exciting. We'll be able to build in, it's amazing that our folks, I think they do a fantastic job now with having all of those spreadsheets and doing this. It's just that they'll be able to focus a lot more on the analytical and the thinking aspects of their job that we need them to do. So while we won't be, like I say, we won't eliminate spreadsheets altogether, we will certainly eliminate a great deal of them. And as far as our directives, that's what we call it when the investment team directs our trade and then we settle the trades, all of that will be electronic as well. And that's part of phase 2.
So, and as I understand, excuse me for asking obvious questions, but I mean, we came across this several years ago when we were doing the efficiency commission studies, and we found out that the data input effort and how we were doing data input across the whole, not just the treasurer's office, but across the city. We had people that were literally printing out a report on this keyboard and literally turning over to another keyboard and entering that same data into another system. And so as I understand this, now this is going to start to hook up between what's happening in the front office with the trades. That information will start, and when we get information reports back from our managers, that'll be automated so the data will be there.
Yeah.
And then you can spend, and so the data entry portion of that is going to be fairly automated. And so
Yes.
now you'll be able to take that data and the spreadsheets, you'll do spreadsheets, what you always want to do, which is analyze the results so that you can make your next trade or make your next move or compile your next strategy.
Mr. Chairman, that's exactly right.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, as we do this, we'll have to upgrade other areas, our custodial bank, as far as when that data comes in. So everything fits together, because you can't have somebody giving you data on a monthly basis when you want to do it on a per trade basis. So all those things are going to have to be upgraded at the same time. So
Is that part of the phase 2, Dan?
No,
To get to that, or is that still part of phase 1?
I think that's early. The earlier, the better.
Yeah.
On the custodial bank, contract changes. So we'll be looking at that, and then that'll allow us to move into these things where you're not doing these click and drags and putting them into different areas, that it will then be more automatic from front to back. And front to back and out to these nice little reports for you guys, we hope. Yeah.
We'll look forward to the changes in your website.
Yeah, that's the plan. That's the
Okay.
plan. So we have all of those statutory and legislative required reports in one spot. So everybody in Wyoming can see what's going on. And I think that I don't think we'll replace RBK, but I think there's going to be a lot of stuff that we can do internally that we've been having to wait, for a month to 2 months for RBK to digest all the material and bring it back to us in the form that was, I guess, usable. So I think there's going to be a lot of more usable data quicker, in pretty much all aspects. But that is probably more where I see the phase 3 stuff coming in, is trying to get all this stuff so it works. So we're doing the job that we have to do, which is investing. And then making sure that as that progresses, that we make sure that we're pulling all the reports out. Of course, the developer has all of the statutory reports that we have, so they're aware of what the baseline is.
All right, thanks. Coach, anything else?
No.
Anybody, anything else on our committee members this morning? All right, thank you. It's interesting times in the investment
Keep up
world
the good work.
and the rest of the world. All right, is there anybody else wants to visit with the campaign committee this morning? Anybody else wants to visit with us this morning? There appearing to be none. All right, committee members. We'll just open it up. Other things that you, talking to Chairman Nicholas this morning, we were looking at and kind of what we thought. First of all, we have under the budget bill, we have the assignment for Speaker Barlow's. He wanted us to study what it takes to move to a cash budgeting system. So we do have that on our list. We also were talking about, I think it falls right in. We wanted to take a look at,
They were sitting in the captain. Going through the process.
we wanted to talk about in light of the fact that neither the resolutions passed, how close can we move towards the model we wanted to move towards without those? And so I think in part of this, we were thinking part of, which includes a number of the things. It's easy to include the things that the treasurer talked about, that incentive pay includes probably looking at the size of the reserve accounts, what kind of encumbrances we put on the reserve accounts, probably look at the encumbrances we put otherwhere. There are other ways that we can, we have a lot of legislative directed investments that right now there's only about 82 million of the corpus loaned out in various loans, but I think we can encumber up to almost $600 or $800 million of the corpus on various programs that aren't being reused. We might take just review those and review those types of things and see if, where are the drags on that we have on investment, and how does that affect the investment strategies and the investment that the treasurer's office employs to make sure that they're not at counter purposes. And we can have that discussion and then bring that to our members on the floor. And with that, I think obviously continuing to work at the treasurer's office on continuing to move that office forward, particularly the back office, keeping updated on that. So with that, those are the things that the Chairman Nicholas and I spoke about. Committee members, what else what's else on your minds? Go ahead, Senator Drew.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree with all those. I think they're all important. I'd like to, I think that just because those two resolutions didn't pass, I think it was more of a case that we still need to keep working on it. And I hope we do. I think that the two topics that the Treasurer's Office gave us are good, even though we have 4 requests to appropriations to talk about compensation. I think the compensation in the Treasurer's Office and in the Retirement Office are kind of a separate subject that we should, maybe Captain should take up. And with that, I also think that we should continue to, I know we have in the reports bill, we'll see how that comes out today. I know it's on 3rd reading, but just continue to work with the Treasurer's Office and as they work through their new systems and get things forward. I'd like to keep close track on that.
Okay. Thank you. Got a couple of those jotted down. Anybody else?
Larry, we got your comments here. I think we talked a little bit about them, but before you came in, and that's reviewing the consistency of terms and conditions of the programs targeted for political subdivisions. Just once again, any drags on our investment portfolio by our current system of guaranteeing and tying up our active funds. So.
being utilized, but yet they're being held. 10%. That have substantial obligations or potential obligations, some that aren't being used at all, and particularly the farm loan portion of that. There's millions tied up there that are sitting there for that purpose but aren't being utilized. So anyway.
Okay. I think thank you for that. I think that's, as we look at that, it affects what we do is if we're going to try and move to this endowment, this modified endowment model. It's definitely, and Representative Obermiller, I saw you down there.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just rolling back to the resolutions and the work on the resolutions in terms of setting up and maybe providing a little bit more background. I think it would be helpful, I think, if LSO would flesh out some definition of terms around that whole concept and maybe present to us the terms that would require constitutional amendments, definitions that possibly wouldn't require a constitutional amendment. So we can kind of zero in on how to frame these topics around definitions we can work with. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that's it's important to know where we are and how far we can go with where we are, and what we can do where we're at constitutionally and obviously statutorily. So I think that's inherent in the process we're trying to do. Do you get that in? Does that make sense to you? Okay. Anything else? Representative Schwartz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to add on to that, we probably want to include whether we need help from our congressional delegation on the acts of admission for some of the accounts we have.
No. That would, yeah. That's actually a pretty interesting question, Ian. Do you understand that question? I mean, if are there things that we need to change in our active admission, even in light of the resolutions, joint resolutions not passing? Are there things that need to happen in the active admission to allow us to move forward in modernizing the common school permanent land fund in particular?
Mr. Chairman, we can sure look at that. Obviously, a lot of the active admission language is then mirrored in our constitutional language. So one wouldn't be good without the other, but I think we can look and see if there are some differences there and if that would have a benefit to us. As we've said before, our research indicates that other states have likely had a fairly easy time doing that. It's not a huge roadblock to get it changed. So if there would be some advantages, we'll look at that.
Okay, thank you. Is that what you had in mind, Representative Schwartz? Anyone else? Anyone else? I can't believe that Representative Harshman has an idea.
Just a little one. No, just, I think if there's, if we could have some time to talk about, are there any other funds that need some account kind of cleanups, like the Hathaway timing of those two accounts? That bill failed. 1514, one excuse was to merge those two accounts because we've got that June 30th sweep. And then it has to go to the reserve account when they pay bills in August. Are there other issues out there? Maybe this committee brings that. The education committee brought it. So I think that's one. And I think there's probably others out there, LSO fiscal and others can tell us about those. Maybe we can fix those.
What dumb stuff are we doing?
Yeah. And then the other part, Mr. Chairman, is two things. I think, are there other accounts that we should look at for Amendment A investment? And then if there are, we bring an Amendment A bill. If there's 2, 3, 4 more out there, I don't know. Maybe there's some that we should.
Well, and that reminds me, Vice President Hicks found that one account that is a little education account.
Yeah.
And we swept it into the, was it was less than, was a couple $100,000, I think.
600,000.
600,000. We swept it. We just have sweeping it into the,
Sure.
to the school foundation program, but you know, how many more of those are out there? And I know that management audit, back I think when President Schiffer was on management offer, they did it. They looked at all those different funds and maybe, and that may give you guys a little roadmap of some of the things you can look at. There's an old management audit report that looked at a bunch of those things. I mean, I remember when President Schiffer was doing that, I mean, I found like $20 million or something, $30 million of things that were just out in these various accounts that people had kind of forgotten about.
And the last one, Mr. Chairman, just, it really probably goes to that. I wrote for number 2, in my own words, I think what you said was kind of how do we move towards this endowment with or without constitutional or things. And I think a part of that is really this reserve account size. And then, and if that can be invested in Amendment A and what should it be? And I think it goes into your work on appropriations. Are we doing 4-year projections? If we're going to do 6-year projections, that changes the world. I mean, we're going to be broke all the time. And I think we ought to kind of think about what is our plan on that, and then what are the size of those. And actually, the common school account's getting better return right now, and I think it might not be as high as we think it is. I've been throwing that 225 number out there, but that's more of a 6-year number, I think, in my little league math on it. But we're going to do 4-year projections, which I think is great. Might be something less, but as we work off, as we budget, I mean, we budget like every government in the world, we budget off projections. So anyway, that's my thought on that. Just to kind of, what is that number? Maybe it's 150, maybe it isn't, maybe it's 140. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I think that's kind of inherent in as we look. I mean, when whatever's in the reserve fund is invested differently than what's in the corporate, you know, the major, the non-reserve funds. And so, you know, that's all part of, I mean, so what is the right size of those to be, and how do we determine what those be, and what are the factors we got to determine? And we can look at that. We've been thrown around, you know, we've been everywhere in the last 5 years, from saying it should be 65 to 225, and you know, and so it, you know, we can certainly have some discussion analysis on what those ought to be, recognizing that it may be higher, but it also may be lower. So, you know, we'll go and we'll go where the data takes us.
Mr. Chairman, and I apologize for being late, but I don't know if it was brought up, but there is a footnote in the budget now to look at a cash-based budgeting
Yeah,
thing.
we've got that.
But did we include in that to look at going to an annual budget? Because my understanding, talking to budget and fiscal staff, the reality of going to a biennial cash-based budget is probably unlikely. But under an annual budgeting scenario, it could be feasible. So I just wonder if that's something that we would at least want to go out to and do the exploratory exploration this year to look at, you know, what states do this, how does that look like, what would be the transition? Because my discussion is a lot of it to go to an annual budget cycle. It's the cash flows issues that start to become a problem. But is that something that we want to look at?
I thought that was in the footnote. Wasn't that included in the footnote language?
I thought it was just cash based, but
We have somebody who really is looking at the footnote. Polly, have you got?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I could read the footnote. It's very short.
Sure.
It's section 326 of the budget bill. The select committee on capital financing and investment shall review all cash balances of and statutory revenue deposits to the general fund, budget reserve account, strategic investments and projects account, and legislative stabilization reserve account, and other statutory revenue distributions. Recommend any necessary statutory revisions required to implement a biennial or annual cash-based budgeting framework in the most efficient manner, beginning with the immediately succeeding biennium, and report and recommend legislation to the legislature not later than December 1 of 2022. So it does reference annual.
Thank you, Polly.
Okay, so anyone else? So a couple other things that the co-chair and I talked about. Number one would be the following up the implementation of House Bill 244 and continuing our work to, right now that's about 150, 60-page bill. And the essence of it is continue to look at whether or not the investment team should be or ought to be an independent entity. And as part of that, we would look at the report that the IFC prepared and submitted in November on recommendations of best practices and how to essentially insulate our investment team so it's not subject to political influence. And basically, as we move towards this endowment model, the concept is what really provides your enhanced returns is consistency of policy and operations over time. It's just the key components to it. And so just to follow up on that. And so another component of that we talked about was having the opportunity to meet and sit down with and have a work session with the IFC themselves. Have this capped then in all probability that meeting would be in Jackson because that's where 3 or 4 of those members reside at least part of the time of the year, and have them walk through the report that they presented, that they put together, explain what their concepts are and how they develop them and how they believe that would translate into something that would work within the construct that we have of our investment portfolio for the state of Wyoming. So that to me, that's kind of the big item on our docket. The one last component was looking at performance compensation to make sure that it's doing what we intended it to be, both in terms of how we pay it and how it's calculated, and whether or not we're being consistent with how we're setting up and making our markers. So, I mean, what do you have to be, and if you're allowed to hedge to get around to meet your market target, is that the appropriate way to do it? Is it the fair way to do it? And are you earning your living basically as we do it? So that was one of the issues that I've been wondering about, both with the WRS and with the Treasurer's office. And so if you look at everything we've just talked about, it's a significant lift. I think it's going to take 3 or 4 meetings of this committee, and it's going to elevate the work that this committee does to a higher profile and a deeper dive on all of these issues. Typically we meet once or twice in this committee, and but to flesh out what we have talked about, it's going to take a little bit more work than that and more time and commitment on our part if we choose to delve into it, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, I was just wondering if we're going to meet in Jackson, is there any gratuitous float trips to fish on the Snake River that any member might be inclined to provide?
Mr. Chairman, I can respond to that, and the rates are negotiable.
The rates are negotiable.
Mr. Chairman, we thank you for that.
At the end of the day, we do as we do take the assigned topics that management council assigns us. So those of you on management council, you probably get the final word anyway. So
Mr. Chairman, along that line, Representative Nicholas just said, he said, so, but I agree with that assessment. It's going to take a significant number more days. So what is that recommendation that this committee is going to make to management council? What do we have now? Is it 2 or 3 days? So we want to double those to 6, or we're looking at 8? It'd be nice to have a specific recommendation from the committee on how many days they want, so we can work, make sure that we've got the budget to cover that.
Ian, what have we asked for in the past or last year?
Mr. Chairman, I'll look. I believe that we asked for a $40,000 appropriation in the last budget, which typically allows us about 4 days worth of meetings. So we could have 2 2-day meetings.
So at a minimum, I think we need 3 2-day meetings, probably 6. Yeah.
And one of those going to be attached to the treasurer's account? Is that what we would, is that how we try and do that?
Mr. Chairman, I believe that that is coming a separate budget item, though I don't think that has been.
Right,
taken
but
out.
I mean, but if we piggyback it onto the treasurer's conference, then do you know where's the treasurer's conference going to be? Man, Dawn, do we know yet? So. That's okay. Senator Hicks can might tell us where the good fishing holes are.
So I suggest that we ask management council for 2 4-day meetings. I mean,
2 4-day meetings.
Yeah, or 2-day meetings.
Or 2-day meetings. Okay.
Well, part of this, what we have to do is start earlier.
Yeah.
In order to set the groundwork for what we're doing. So I think we'll
start looking at days in May.
Yeah.
For first meeting. And we'll probably do most of those in probably here or Casper. If we do
Okay,
Casper,
anything
we'll
else?
meet in the new, should be in the new rooms in the Casper State Office Building.
That'll be fun. That'd be cool.
Mr. Chairman, while I have a captive audience, would you like to set some of those dates? Right now, it looks like the latter part of May, the second 2 weeks of May is available.
Everybody, look at their calendars, second 2 weeks of May, a time that will not.
Is that May of this year, Mr. Co-Chair?
Which days?
So.
We're just at, if you look at the last 2 weeks, second 2 weeks of May, did you say?
So the week of the 16th to the week of the 23rd, that's the Monday, the 15th.
Mhm.
16th would probably be better.
That works for me.
You want to do it? You want to do it the 16th and 17th? First one, 16th and 17th?
No.
Huh?
Yeah.
Okay.
There you go. How hard was that? Nice job, Karen.
And what location for that one?
And where do we want to hold that? Casper?
We'll do it. Where do you want to hold it? Members, you want Casper or Cheyenne?
Or the treasure conference is moved, but if you want to do one in Jackson to do an IFC, I would suggest either that time in May or October, because in that way you get outside of the highest rate.
Yeah.
season.
And Mr. Chair, I would add with the IFC, since the airport's going to be closed in May, they might
make it
find it
October.
more convenient in October.
Yeah, probably. Although the rates have been bad.
Don't you have any football games? Did your team have any football games at Jackson?
Can you play Jackson?
When's the last day of football season?
I like October and Teton.
Depends.
Just double the-
All right.
Okay, I think we're running late.
I think we are. I think we're late for gaveling in. Thank you, folks. Appreciate it.